With just 37 days to go until Election Day, a new CNN poll of polls, which looks at all of the numbers that we're getting in, shows an extremely tight race tonight. It has both Vice President Kamala Harris and former President Donald Trump stumping in crucial battleground states over the last few days, including today. Harris today is at a California fundraiser before speaking at a rally in Nevada tonight in Las Vegas. Trump, meanwhile, was speaking in Erie, Pennsylvania, a must-win state this afternoon, repeating his attacks against Harris for the second day. Listen to this.
Joe Biden became mentally impaired, sad. But lying Kamala Harris, honestly, I believe she was born that way. There's something wrong with Kamala. And I just don't know what it is, but there is definitely something missing. Joe Biden became mentally impaired. Kamala was born that way. She was born that way. And if you think about it, only a mentally disabled person could have allowed this to happen to our country. Anybody would know this.
Yes, you heard that right. That is Donald Trump referring to his 2024 opponent as mentally disabled, a comment that I should note has warranted a rebuke from the American Association of People with Disabilities. Here with me tonight, Amisha Cross, who is a Democratic strategist, a former campaign advisor to Barack Obama. Also, Scott Jennings, CNN's senior political commentator and former special assistant to President George W. Bush. And Scott, obviously, that's what Trump said yesterday. He just repeated the part about her being mentally impaired earlier today. We're seeing reaction from this coming from candidates like Larry Hogan, who was in a tough race in Maryland for the Senate. Also, Trump's ally, Lindsey Graham, being asked about this today. I mean, putting the offensive nature of it even just aside for a moment, and it is offensive, obviously, to people with disabilities, 37 days out from the election, is that what you want the Republican nominees saying on stage at a rally?
Well, look, it's tough rhetoric, no doubt. I would just point out that every time Kamala Harris opens her mouth, every time Walz does, every time a Democrat surrogate for their campaign does, they tell a bunch of lies about Donald Trump and about J.D. Vance and about what their record is. They lie about IVF. They lie about Project 2025. They lie about the dictator thing, the bloodbath thing, the ripping up the Constitution thing. It's lie after lie after lie. And I don't hear a lot of Democrats rushing to television screens to commit, rhetorical, ritualistic suicide over it every time their campaign does that. So, yeah, is it rough language? Yes. He should not use the term mentally disabled. I think it's perfectly fine to call into question whether your opponent has made smart decisions in office or not. But you can't deny that the Democrats have been sharp to the point of lying about Trump this entire campaign. So I'm going to give them a little grace on tough rhetoric in October here, which you always get in the fall of a presidential campaign.
But is calling someone mentally disabled, which is offensive to people who do have mental disabilities, that's tough rhetoric in your view, Scott?
I just said he should not use the term mentally disabled. It is perfectly fine to call into question whether your opponent has made smart decisions in the current office in which they hold, which she is the vice president, and she has made decisions. That's perfectly fine. I would not use that term if I were him.
Yeah, of course, no one is saying you can't criticize a political opponent, but calling them mentally disabled. I mean, Amisha, as I was listening to those comments and going back and listening to the full context of them, I mean, even Trump himself, as he was speaking in Erie, Pennsylvania yesterday, called it a dark speech in his own words.
It wasn't just dark. It was ignorant. It was defaming, and it's quite hurtful to individuals, not only who suffer from disabilities themselves, but the families of those. My older brother was born with the umbilical cord around his neck. He has the capacity of a 10-year-old. He lives with that every single day. For my family, that is considered a very offensive commentary that Donald Trump did. But in addition to that, this is something that is not beyond the pale for him. He's known for offensive rhetoric, but he did it on purpose. There's something else that's dark here. Throughout history, specifically eugenics history, specifically African-American history, we've seen time and again where powerful white men try to basically create this idea that Black people were less smart, that their brains were smaller. It was even a pseudoscience for a very long time. I think that what we see in Donald Trump is somebody that sometimes media gives a little bit too much credit to. There is a dark history that he likes to invoke. He does it because it's a dog whistle. He's also someone who knows that his words have meaning. He is using this to basically continue to try to diminish Kamala Harris because he cannot attack her on her policies. I agree with Scott partially on this. If he was to do that, if he was to come up with and, stick to policy, have a conversation about the things he disagrees with in Democratic policy, that is fair game. This is a guy who does not want to have a policy discussion at all. There's a lot there. He chose to go dark. He chose to go aggressive. He chose to go offensive. And that has nothing to do with the election coming up very shortly, as much as it is the man who he happens to be. This is the rhetoric he uses on purpose. Republicans call for a tone down of rhetoric after the assassination attempts against Donald Trump. Donald Trump is the one who continues to amplify that rhetoric.
Scott, what do you make of that?
Well, I'm surprised to hear somebody say that Donald Trump's responsible for the rhetoric that possibly led to the fact that he was nearly assassinated twice, but we'll leave that hanging there. The reality is, I think Donald Trump, just to tackle one thing, does want to have a policy conversation. He'd love to talk about the policies that led to inflation. He'd love to talk about the policies at the border. I think he'd love to talk about the policies that gave Joe Biden and Kamala Harris under a 40% approval rating for most of their term in office, and make this election a referendum on those policies and whether we need change or not. Those are the correct vectors for him in this campaign, and I think there's some evidence in the polling that it's working. In our own CNN poll that was released last week, 51% of people said that Trump had a successful term. Only 37% said the same of Biden. So if you want to have a policy debate, which I think Trump does, he's on pretty solid ground to do it.
Amisha, though, when it comes to this, Harris has taken this tactic of when Trump questioned her race and when he said other things about her in the past of saying, she's not harping on it. She doesn't spend a lot of time on it. She'll often maybe have a short response and move on. How do you think she should respond, if at all, to something like this?
I think she should not. This is a guy who is trying to bait her. He's trying to draw her in. She should ignore it completely. Now, her surrogates, I'm sure, will be out having multiple conversations about it and what it means and how deep he is digging and the ridiculousness of this. This is a woman who does not have to defend her pedigree. She is highly credentialed. She is the most credentialed person to ever run for president of the United States. And that's not just for a woman. That's for anyone who has ever run for president of the United States. This is a guy who, before jumping into the presidential foray, was known for reality TV, was known for his businesses, was known for failing and going bankrupt multiple times over. She doesn't have to defend her intellectual capacity to him.
Amisha Cross, Scott Jennings, thank you both for joining. We're going to take you back to the breaking news that is unfolding in the Middle East next with some major updates over the weekend.